people of the internet, welcome back. In this video I'm going to be talking about deaf culture and deaf politics. I've kind of, over the past couple of years of being deaf, I've figured a few things out. This is by no means a complete list, but I'm going with something. I've made a PowerPoint, look, very fancy. So, guide to deaf with a capital D, deaf with a lowercase d, deaf with a lowercase d but really, really tiny, deaf with an uppercase D but really, really big, deaf plus with a lowercase d, deaf plus with a capital D, HOH, culture. Yeah, pretty inclusive. Right. First, what is being capital D / lower d deaf? Is it not being able to hear? Find out the answer. No, it is not. Obviously not. That would make too much sense. It's not that at all. Option 1 of what it may be. Having some form of hearing loss. That's one option. That's not your only choice. Option 2. Not having hearing loss because you have deaf gain, which is obviously different. So instead of losing hearing, you have gained being deaf. It's like you don't lose your job, you gain unemployment. I don't know if that's anything different, but some people it is. Right. Option 2.5, specifically having a profound hearing loss / deaf gain / whatever. So it's specifically a hearing loss of over 90 decibels. Some things say 95 decibels, some say 91 decibels, but like over about 90 decibels, then you might be considered deaf in option 2.5. Option 3 is another option. That is culturally identifying as capital D deaf or lowercase d deaf. What does this even mean? It's just saying, is it just saying that you're deaf? Is it going to a deaf club? Is it having deaf friends? Can you be culturally deaf and identify as deaf when you can literally hear? Like, I don't know. But this is option 3 of what being deaf might be. Is it easier? Can you see more if I do that? Yeah. What is being deaf with a lowercase d? This is the annoying person version. So this is the annoying things that people that fall into this category may do. Using speech and thinking that you're better than people who sign. Thinking that you deserve more rights and opportunities because you're the superior form of deaf person. Thinking that deaf people deserve to be treated as lesser, despite being deaf yourself. Telling every other capital D / lowercase d deaf person to get hearing aids / cochlear implants, even if they don't want them, because technology is improving all the time, and you can't just expect everyone else to adapt around you. Telling parents that they're terrible people for using sign language with their deaf child. Thinking that lip reading makes you smarter. I have experienced a lot of these. Sometimes from hearing people as well, that you can't expect everyone else to adapt around you. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Not everyone will, but it's not an unreasonable expectation to have. And people ask, like, oh, why can some deaf people lip read and some can't? Is it the smart ones that can read lips? No, it's not. Next slide. What is being lowercase d deaf? Not annoying person version. Being someone who is deaf and prefers to communicate using spoken language / lip reading / hearing technology. Usually not super involved in the deaf community. They might have some deaf friends, but they're usually deaf people who don't use sign language as their friends as well. Pretty chill about other people using sign language, but they're just like, oh, I just don't do it myself. But they're okay with it. and have a bit of an each to their own sort of attitude with how other people choose to live their lives. These are the cool lowercase d deaf people. What does it mean to be capital D deaf? This is the non-annoying person version first for some reason for this one. A deaf person who is more involved in the deaf community and uses sign language to communicate. Supports the use of sign language by deaf and hearing people, but is pretty chill about it. Yeah, obviously there's a bit of overlap. Like, there needs to be like a medium D version, but for like everyone else who like uses a mixture, but whatever. And then here's the annoying version, which is aka massive giant capital D deaf people. And then the annoying lowercase d deaf people is the one with the tiny d. That I created that, so I'm copywriting that thing now. Here's the annoying person version. Thinks they're better than people who use hearing technology. Like they're the purer breed of deaf person. Thinks they're better than people with milder hearing loss or hard of hearing people. Because like they chose that. You don't really get a choice, random dudes. So, or women. Women are in this category as well sometimes. To be fair, most of them I've met are men, but whatever. Super judgmental if you get a cochlear implant, despite the fact that it is literally none of their business. Even more judgmental if you get a cochlear implant for your child and will tell you that it is child abuse. Super impatient with people who are still learning sign language because they expect everyone to just automatically know sign language when they come out of the womb. And think they're superior because their parents are deaf, if they have deaf parents. Some of these people don't actually have deaf parents, but oftentimes they're the ones with deaf parents. And don't like it if you speak, even if it makes sense in your situation for some reason. What is Deaf Plus? This was one I only heard about the other day. I only learned this was a thing. Basically, it just means that you're deaf and have an additional disability as well. This also includes the deaf blindness spectrum. So deaf blindness doesn't necessarily mean you're completely deaf and completely blind. It just means you have hearing and vision loss. So I prefer the term like dual sensory loss or multisensory impairment, which is often kind of used a bit more now, which I think explains it better. But deaf blindness is another term for that thing. I haven't got a separate slide on deaf blindness because it would make this a bit long. Yeah, so a lot of times deafness can co-occur with things like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, a lot of other stuff. I would technically be in this category because I'm also on the autistic spectrum. So I guess it includes like a huge variety of things. Okay, I feel like another category should be made. This is another one of my genius creations. I feel like another category could be made for deaf people with additional societal categories. I'm not sure what else to call this. Like being an ethnic minority or transgender or something. And I've called this Deaf Plus Plus and in rainbow letters. I think that's pretty good. That is in rainbow. The A is kind of invisible, but it's there. It's just yellow. Right. Next. What is HOH? You will see this a lot. It means hard of hearing. It's just an abbreviation. You might not realise that when you see it. I'm pretty sure this category isn't really that well defined. It's basically just everyone who has a hearing loss but doesn't really vibe with any of the things we've talked about before. So it can literally be virtually anything. Some people who are like profoundly hard of hearing will call them like have a profound hearing loss will call themselves hard of hearing, and some people who have like a mild hearing loss will call themselves deaf. it generally kind of, yeah, it can also be anyone who feels like the hearing loss hasn't crossed over into the properly deaf levels. Generally means used by people with mild to severe hearing loss or people with profound hearing loss who are in slight denial or in the annoying lowercase d deaf person category. I mean, that one's a bit low. Plenty of non-annoying people call themselves hard of hearing. That doesn't make you annoying. It's just a very specific sort of person. He's like, I'm not deaf, I'm hard of hearing. It's different. But like, not like, oh, it's just a different thing. Like, I prefer the term. Like, oh, it's different. Like in a, I'm better sort of way. You can tell. It's a different vibe, right? Annoying things. So hard of hearing people don't get off on the annoying category things. Here's the annoying things people in the hard of hearing category do. Telling people with a completely different sort of hearing loss that they should get hearing aids. Okay, like there might be a reason they don't have hearing aids. That's the same as the lowercase d deaf people as well. Like people with like a mild or moderate hearing loss tend to get on really well with hearing aids. Not all the time, but a lot of the time they get on really well with hearing aids. People with like profound hearing loss, hearing aids are a bit hit and miss. Yeah. Telling everyone how CI, so cochlear implants, are awful and they would never consider it. Which is fine. Like you don't have to want to get one, like obviously. But saying that, like, being judgmental of other people who get them, when in the specific scenario you have a mild to moderate hearing loss and wear hearing aids and are super reliant on your hearing and usually don't know a huge amount of sign language and are pretty not great at reading lips. So you're telling other people, don't get cochlear implants, they're awful. Just you wear hearing aids. When you super rely on your hearing, and the people that are thinking about getting cochlear implants usually can't live the lifestyle that you're living with the hearing they want. They want to get a cochlear implant so they can live the lifestyle you're living. That's kind of irritating. I'm not saying that you have to want one for yourself or anything. Obviously, if you have like a mild to moderate hearing loss, cochlear implants aren't for you. Well, they wouldn't be they're not recommended for you. But just don't tell other people what to do. Especially, I mean, I take this a bit better from the people that are like fully in the sign language, capital D deaf community. I understand that a bit more when they don't like cochlear implants. These people, that's just irritating. I feel like the capital D deaf people have a point. These people are just annoying. Speaking for the entire deaf community despite not being involved in it at all, other than telling every deaf person they meet that I get it because I have hearing aids. I mean, of course, you can speak for your own experience. Like, I don't represent the entire deaf community at all. But it's a bit like in the kind of autism community, someone like me who is experience autism in one way, like for example, I can speak, I went to mainstream school, all of that, and telling a parent who has an autistic child who has a lot of accompanying learning disabilities and a lot higher support needs, telling them how to like parent their child and like saying that I speak for their child. Obviously I don't. I can only speak for myself and people with a similar experience to me. Yeah, don't speak for the entire community. Same with the capital D deaf people, they do this as well. Speaking for the entire deaf community. Not every deaf person wants to use sign language. Not every deaf person wants, everyone's different. It's the same as everything else. So, yeah, and you don't, like, for example, I, as someone who is profoundly deaf but uses a cochlear implant and speaks clearly and lives in a mostly kind of hearing-centered environment, I don't know what it's like to be someone who is fully like culturally deaf, who went to deaf school, has a deaf family, uses sign language, doesn't speak. I don't know what that's like, and I don't pretend to. So if you pretend to, it is kind of annoying. What is a coda? So CODA. So it means child of deaf adults. So it means any child who has a parent that's deaf or hard of hearing. Usually refers to the kids of culturally deaf parents who are hearing. And it specifically refers to a hearing child of at least one deaf parent. If you're a deaf child of a deaf parent, then you are just deaf, or deaf of deaf, as in like you're deaf of deaf parents. That's another category, but yeah, this is specifically a hearing child of deaf adults. These people are usually super cool and chill and fantastic advocates for the deaf community. Absolute best hearing signers if their parents are sign language users. Sometimes if their parents spoke to them and didn't sign with them, then they're not going to be. But coders have the potential to be like the best interpreters. Not that interpreters with a hearing family aren't good, but like coders, if someone says, "Oh, I'm a coder," I'm like, cool. You get it. Yeah, the most deaf-aware people you will ever meet. However, annoying people in this category, they don't escape either, but I haven't got a whole slide for the coders because I don't actually know that many coders. Annoying people in this group will act like they know deafness better than people who experience it firsthand. Yeah, that's a bit annoying. It's the same as using the autism analogy. People who pretend they understand what it's like to have autism yourself because they know someone else with autism or they've seen people with autism. It's like, no, but you don't have it. So yes, you understand it more than someone that's never experienced, like never been around it, but you don't have the same understanding as someone that actually experienced that themselves. So yeah, speak from your experience, but don't act like your experience is the same as someone that actually has it. Hearing impaired. Right, so hearing impaired is basically another word for not being able to hear. It kind of can be any of the labels we've covered previously, except coda, because coders are not hearing impaired. Some people don't mind it, some people hate it. Probably best avoided. I don't know anyone that loves it, so maybe stay away from it unless someone specifically says they like it. It was invented to make things kind of more PC, like a more PC version of being deaf, but it kind of ended up being less PC than the original terms, so everyone just stuck with the original ones. But this exists, just so you know. Deaf culture mistakes as a hearing person. Don't know why I did a sound effect. Any sort of patronising comments or backhanded compliments, like, "You speak really well for a deaf person," or "Wow, it's amazing you work this job despite being deaf." Don't say things like that. Like, you'd never go up to a hearing person and say, "You speak really well." Really? Like, unless they have like a really, really particularly nice voice. Like, I don't think people really say that. It's like people saying like, "Oh, you speak good Spanish for an English person." It's like, yeah, don't say that. "You're clever for a woman." Like, it gives those sort of vibes, which is like, maybe don't say that. Telling me about some random deaf person you met once. For example, "When I was in school, there was a deaf boy in the class below me. He had hearing aids and could talk and stuff. I think his name began with an L. Do you know him?" No, I didn't go to your primary school in 1982, so I'm going to say no. Pretending you are fluent in sign language when you're really not. Being like, "I know sign language," then slowly finger spell your name over 5 minutes, and that's your sign language. I mean, I really appreciate it when people are like, oh, I tried to learn a bit and here's kind of what I've got so far. But don't be like, oh yeah, I know sign language. Like I've fully learned it when you haven't. Like that's annoying. Teaching sign language when you have no clue what you're doing. So this kind of goes in the above category but takes it a step further. You don't actually really know what you're talking about, but you've decided you're teaching something. That's a bit like me buying a guitar off Amazon and like doing a couple of guitar lessons and then starting to become a guitar teacher myself when I don't actually play the guitar. Like it's just a bit weird and it's kind of cringe and embarrassing. So maybe don't. Telling me you know Makaton/baby signs and expecting me to be impressed / not realizing they're not the same as BSL or ASL or any other sign language. So Makaton is a sign system based on British Sign Language, but it's specifically designed to be used for people with learning disabilities. It's not the same as British Sign Language. I don't know it, so unfortunately, I'm not going to be that impressed. Like, you can show me your Makaton signs, but like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it's any good or not. Baby signs are like a few signs. They don't have any grammar or anything, but they just do it for babies before they can speak. Again, like, I don't really care what the baby sign for like nappy is, milk, food. Like, I don't care. And I don't know what they are anyway. So if you're showing me, you might as well just be making it up. I don't know. Okay. Interpreter etiquette. Interpreters are not called translators. So translation is usually like a written translation. So you could be like a Spanish to English translator, and that would normally be you translate written text. Interpretation is normally when it's in kind of live in person. So if you have, this is both in sign language and in spoken languages. So if you have a spoken language interpreter, there'll be like the people at the UN with the headsets on who are repeating what's being said in the other language at the same time. Same with sign languages. If it's kind of in person live, that's interpretation, not translation. So you don't have sign language translators because it's not really a written language. You just have interpreters. Talk directly to the deaf person and not like to the interpreter. Can you tell her I'm saying something? You just talk directly to the deaf person. It's the interpreter's job to take what you say and just interpret it. Interpreters are usually hearing. There are deaf interpreters. Usually they're deaf interpreters, but that can hear quite well and speak quite well. I know that sounds like a bit, but like deaf interpreters who've grown up in a more kind of speaking environment or have lost their hearing later. Like I could be an interpreter as long as it's in kind of a quiet environment. I could probably do it. So yeah, there are some deaf interpreters. If you're deaf, it doesn't mean you can't be an interpreter. And most of the people who you see doing the TV sign language, they're deaf usually. I'm sure some of them are hearing, but a lot of them are deaf. The interpreter interprets everything you say. So if you don't want the deaf person to know that you've said something, don't say it, because the interpreter will interpret it. Slow down a little and pause occasionally for the interpreter to catch up. Obviously, it's quite like a bit of a mental challenge to interpret for long periods of time. So it is helpful if you slow down a little bit, not like so slow that it's unnatural, but just, say a sentence, wait for the interpreter to do that, give them a couple of seconds, then say your next sentence, not just a constant, really fast stream, because that must be very hard to interpret. Things you can do to annoy deaf people. This is kind of a reverse psychology, like hinting don't do these things if you don't want to annoy deaf people, but I'm telling you it like you can do it to annoy them, to like maybe encourage you, so it doesn't feel like I'm telling you what to do. I'm telling you what not to do. No, I'm not telling you that you can't do stuff. I'm telling you what the results of these actions would be, which would be annoying someone, I guess. Tell them you want to learn sign language when you don't. This is really annoying. People like, I'll be like, oh, they'll be like, oh, do you sign? I'll be like, yeah, I'm learning. I'm not completely fluent yet, but I'm picking it up. I've done my level 2, whatever. And they'll be like, oh, that's cool. I've always wanted to learn sign language. Do you know any classes or anything in the area? I'm like, oh, cool. Like, let's look this up. Let's find something for you. And then they're like, oh no, I don't actually. Or, oh, then they're trying to get out of it. I'm like, just don't tell me you want to learn it if you don't. Perform an impromptu DIY hearing test. These can be things including screaming really loud to see if I can hear you. What is the point in that? Covering your mouth and seeing if they can understand you. Just stopping using your voice and just mouthing words silently. That's a separate point. People are, oh, you're deaf. But sometimes that can be doing it as a hearing test. See if you notice that they've stopped talking. Or sometimes they're doing it just as like, oh, I can rest my voice because, or I don't know, they just think that they don't need to put the effort into actually using their voice because they're talking to a deaf person. Most deaf people can hear like a little bit, especially if they're using lip reading as their main form of communication. And yeah, if they're not sign language users, most of the time they can hear some. But it's not a guaranteed rule. But just don't mouth words silently. You're better to use your voice than not, because it might be helping. If it's not, then whatever. Talk to them like a toddler. Yeah, that's a good way to annoy someone. Like, are you okay over there? Or do you want some food? Do you want a drink? Like, no, don't talk to me like that. I'm 23. I'm an adult. Refuse to use their hearing technology or acting like it's going to explode or something, or testing it. Refer to point 2 for the testing it point. So this can be like, I have like a little microphone, kind of like this, but a bit different, that I give to my lecturers and stuff at university, and they put it kind of around their neck, and it transmits their voice directly from that microphone to my cochlear implant, and that helps me to hear them. Sometimes people are like, oh, does it record me? I'm like, no, it doesn't record you. Just put it on. Just put it on. It just helps me to hear you. And they're like, oh, are you sure you need it? I'm like, yeah, pretty sure. Or then they put it on and they're like really so careful with it, like it's gonna explode or something. Like if it was that fragile, they wouldn't trust me with it. So don't worry too much. Or testing it. This can be like someone turning around and like whispering into it and seeing if I can hear them. Yeah, don't do that. It's annoying because everyone does it and it's really annoying. Tell them you'll tell them later, or it doesn't matter when they don't understand something. Bonus points if you then forget what you meant to tell them later. It's always good when someone tells, like, I'll tell you later. And then I say, oh, what did you mean to tell me then? And they're like, oh, I forgot. It can't have been that important. I'm like, okay. You can at least remember what you're going to say. Talk to everyone except the deaf person. This is good. So if someone's like with their parent or they're just with another person, always talk to the other person and never the deaf person themselves, because there's nothing that feels better than knowing that you are completely like that you feel invisible. That feels amazing to deaf people. That was sarcasm. It does not. This is on the list of things you can do to annoy people. Tell them they have selective hearing, or accusing them of not listening. Chances are, if a deaf person sometimes doesn't hear you, it's probably because they actually can't hear you, because they're deaf. Most of the, like, literally none of the time, I am pretending I don't hear someone. If I don't hear them, I don't hear them. Tell them that you know sign language and then do a rude gesture, which is your sign language. I'm not impressed. And that is the end of the slideshow. Let me put this down. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Sorry, let me move back. I just had to be there so you could see the screen. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any questions or other further observations about deaf culture, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And thank you for watching. Bye!